So a lot of people ask me, hey Marcus, why is frequency so powerful? Why is the application of frequency such an effective tool to support us to transition, to grow, to heal, to stabilize, harmonize? Why is it so important? And I think to understand that, we need to look deep into the sort of foundations, not only of frequency itself, but actually the universal creation and potentially what's actually happening in the universe. You know, some of the brightest minds in the world have said to us that everything is just vibration. The whole universe is vibrating. And with that sort of in mind, we can then translate into that everything then has frequency. And as far as we know right now, this is some of the fundamental building blocks of the universe itself. What I'm most interested in is what is the process from sort of almost nothing into matter itself, whether that's the human form or a tree or a blade of grass or whatever it might be. What is it that's creating this to materialize? How is this sort of happening at a very fundamental level? And there's a couple of quantum theories that I think help us to answer this question. Let's dive in and have a little bit of a look. Because if we look at the process of what I call universal creation, I think what we're going to find is a couple of interesting things that sort of play out here. I think if we imagine that what we're looking at is how does matter sort of form? How is that created? And in our case, how does a healthy human sort of be created? And if we sort of follow this process, we look that matter's made up of a whole lot of particles. Some of those particles look like atoms at fundamental levels, and underneath atoms we have subatomic particles, subatomic sort of particles. But what's actually underneath that? So what we have to do is look into a theory in quantum physics called the superstring theory to really understand what might be below subatomic particles. And what quantum physics or a pathway in quantum physics believe is that everything's made up of these strings, these little vibrating strings. And they might look like little lines like this or vibrating sort of circles. And it comes from the theory around superstring theory that everything is vibrating, these little strings are vibrating. The vibration of those strings, depending on how they're vibrating, then informs subatomic particles, bosons and muons and fermions and all these exotic particles. Those exotic subatomic particles then inform atomic particles, which inform the rest of the particles that exist, and then that informs matter or creates matter. Again, whether that's a human or it's a blade of grass or a tree or a mountain or anything we see in the universe, a planet, for example, solar system. And it's these strings that vibrate to create that pathway. Now, uh, superstring theory, when it appeared, really split the quantum world into two: people who believed in it, people who didn't. So there's still a little bit of controversy around superstring theory. There are more and more sort of experiments that are proving that it's probably correct, but it's still not 100% just yet. But let's imagine that is true, because I think it helps us to really understand why frequency can be so amazingly sort of powerful. So, so these little strings that make up matter look like this, little vibrating strings. Maybe they look like a whole lot of these vibrating, or little lines vibrating, and maybe they form into these incredible geometries that then inform subatomic and atomic particles how to sort of come together. And I think that's an important part of this, because if we look at the whole cycle or the potential cycle, from maybe what we think down here is, the all-intelligent universe, and maybe you consider that as, as God, or maybe you consider it as, consciousness, whatever you consider it as, uh, is beautiful and perfect, right? And at some point in time, let's imagine the universe decides it wants to create something and it's all beautiful, amazing intelligence. Or maybe it just all happens by accident. I don't know. Let's either way is absolutely perfect. Let's imagine that the universe says, well, I want to create the human form. So the universe then creates this wobble potentially, this wobble in fabric and space-time. From a quantum physics point of view, this is often referred to as M theory, which is membrane theory, and that the whole universe is made of a membrane or membranes that wobble. And as they wobble, they then bump these strings potentially, which then start to vibrate. So then we have these vibrating strings, and they might look like all sorts of things, little round strings, long straight strings, but they start to vibrate. That vibration then creates a frequency, because everything that vibrates has a frequency. So all of a sudden it creates this frequency. That frequency then creates geometry. And it's this geometry that then creates almost like a blueprint from which the subatomic, and in turn, right, atomic particles can coalesce around. Those atomic particles then come together to form matter, or in our case, the human form. And so if this process is unfolding like this, and we know that everything's sort of vibrating, right, in the universe, we then must realize that those vibrations create a frequency. And it might not be sound, of course, it might be ultra high, ultra low frequencies that we can't perceive because our hearing is has a small bandwidth of perception around sound or vibration and frequency. So often it's outside of that perception. But we know frequency creates geometry. And we know that from the experiments with cymatics, where they put sand on a metal plate, they play frequency into the metal plate, the sand then starts to alter, creates a geometry based on that particular frequency. And as the frequency is either increased or lowered, the geometry of sand moves and vibrates, and then vibrates into the next geometry. So once the frequency is set, the specific frequency, the sand forms a geometry. So if we take that theory, or those experiments, not theory, those experiments, and we know frequency must be creating a geometry. And I think then that geometry is creating a blueprint for subatomic atomic particles to start to coalesce and form around, which then helps us to obviously form matter. Now, if this is the case, the quality, right, the quality of this vibration and this frequency is going to determine what happens at the matter end. So even after something is formed, right, the form of the matter is continuing to vibrate and create a frequency. Our whole body is a frequency orchestra made up of all sorts of instruments. Some we might call the lungs and the heart and the liver and the kidneys and all of these things, and even the cells and every part of the cell, and even down to periodic table of elements, and all of these things vibrating, creating frequency together. The whole thing together creates this resonant field of frequency, vibration, and energy. And when all of those things are in a harmonic state, then the form of that matter stays whole. When the vibration and frequency, resonant field of that matter becomes disharmonic, that's when illness and sickness can occur. So with that understanding, we can start to see why frequency can be so powerful. Because when the human form experiences a disharmonic resonant frequency, we can then play the harmonic version of the frequency. Again, whether that's a system in the body, right? The vascular system, cardiovascular system, or digestive system, or whatever it might be, nervous system. We can play the frequency for that system or that organ or the cell, really at any level. That will then help to bring it back into harmony, almost like it's reminding the human, the person, the matter being, how to vibrate, how to resonate. And it's almost like a little sort of tap on the shoulder. Hey, lungs, remember how to do this. Hey, liver. Hey, body. Hey, emotions. Hey, nervous system. This is how you should be behaving. And so what we're doing is we're reminding the body how to behave. And because we're working at an absolute fundamental level, potentially the fundamental level of how everything comes into being, um, we're able to positively affect a system in a kind of really profound yet really gentle way. Um, and I think that is the key to why frequency is can be so effective. It's not the be all and end all of everything, of course, but I think it can be really supportive and helpful with anything else that someone might be doing. This is not a replacement for anything. It's not a replacement for medicine. It's not a replacement for other methodologies and modalities because they all have their place. But it is a really great support mechanism to help anything else to move a bit quicker and faster and more effectively. It can be used as a standalone for sure, but I think it works even better when it's supporting other structures, other methodologies, other interventions. I think it can be really, really helpful for that. And we've certainly seen that when people have had sort of operations or some of these more, deeper interventions. We've just seen how well frequency can support recovery, and amongst a whole lot of other things. So I think this hopefully helps you to understand why frequency is potentially so amazingly powerful and effective. If you'd like to find out more, please subscribe to this channel. Please share this video with friends, family, colleagues, anyone you feel might benefit from this. And stay tuned for our next live event where I'm going to dive really deeply into all of these concepts and help you to sort of understand and sort of put it all together. So I'd love to see you there. But subscribe to the channel now, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, thanks for watching. See you soon. Ciao.